Welcome back to Behind the Scenes. Today I'm continuing my conversation with actor, writer, producer, director, my good friend John Dayton.
On the first movie, that was done through Burt Reynolds Productions, where I was vice president, in charge of development. So, oh God, I forgot about this. The whole idea of that first movie was not Ryan O'Neal. It was to be Burt Reynolds. And it was to be Burt Reynolds and Katharine Hepburn. Well, the publicists, everybody thought, wow, that would be sensational. Forgive me if I get my movies mixed up here. On the first movie, The Man Upstairs, Jim Prideaux wrote the script, and that was great because Jim had known Kate since the early 60s, and they had worked together many times. And also, Jim had written previous two movies for Kate for television.
Mhm.
But thinking of Kate, I thought, how about James? So as Dwayne wrote the second film that we did together, Jim wrote the first one, and with Burt in mind. And we it was in the newspapers. It was on Parade magazine, that Sunday magazine that they used to have. Full cover, Katharine Hepburn, Burt Reynolds. I was on the phone with Army Archer, who was at that time, I think
Yeah,
of my generation, well, and of yours. I loved Army. What a sweet, good man he was, and big because
yeah, big columnist, yeah, about Hollywood. Yeah,
if you knew if you got your name mentioned in Army's column, you would get attention.
yeah.
It was a big deal. So we had a reading with Burt at Burt's house. I had hired George Schaefer, who had directed Kate before and was a wonderful, wonderful director, to direct the movie. So she had had relationships with Jim, with the director, but she didn't know who Burt Reynolds was. Now, I didn't fly her out for this reading, thank God. We had the reading at Burt's house up on Mulholland, and I actually have a tape of that reading
Wow.
and Burt's comments during the whole thing. All right, let's just cut to the bottom line. Burt bowed out.
Hmm.
Now, here we have this campaign out there. Suddenly, he calls me into his office and he says, one day he just calls me in the office. He says, oh, John, I'm going to direct this movie. I think it was Universal had made this offer for him to direct a movie during the summer. And anyway, Henry Winkler, and I remember that because I also remember that it wasn't a pleasant situation between Burt Reynolds and Henry Winkler. Henry has talked about it before,
Huh.
so I'm not telling tales here. But I was stuck. Who? And this was at the last minute.
Wow.
I think Burt was afraid of Kate. I really do. He never met her. In the beginning, she said, "Well, why doesn't he come and see me?"
Hmm.
What was I to say? I don't know. Anyway, I needed to cast this show right away. I needed to cast the man right away.
Mhm.
I didn't know what to do. I knew that whoever I chose, I didn't want to come to Kate. I didn't want to tell Kate Burt's out and I got a recast. Um, because I knew I needed to make the decision. What happened was, oh, John, oh God, I'm going to make a list of names if we ever do this again. John Voight. So because of that, him doing that movie, and he's also another gifted, wonderful actor, just bananas, so good. So I called John, and he came into the office and he read for the first movie to take over Burt's departure. And I thought, great, and he was wonderful. But I believe it was the next day. This is why I never called the network to say, this, or this. The next day or the day after, he called and he said, I got a movie in Australia and I'm going to be off doing that, but I'm really, really sorry. So I was stuck. So I did call Trevor Walton at CBS, who was at the time, along with John Matoyan, was head of movies. So I said, Trevor, I'm kind of running out of ideas and we've got to shoot. So do you have any ideas? And he said, how about, you go with Ryan O'Neal? And I said, I thought that was a great idea, wonderful idea. So, and I knew he was a marvelous actor and I'd never met him, knew nothing about him. So I flew to New York and told Kate what was going on. And she said, well, can I see something of Ryan's?
Mm-hmm.
So I ran down to the video store on the corner of 2nd and 49th and got a video of Paper Moon.
Mm.
It's a great movie with his daughter.
Yeah.
Tatum. And got back to Kate's, went upstairs. She didn't even have a television. She had a Sony stacked away in a corner covered with dust, right? And I said, Kate, this isn't going to work. She said, oh, I know. This is Katharine Hepburn. Oh, my God. She said, I know where we can get one. So she walks me out down through Turtle Bay Gardens over to the other side of Turtle Bay. And she said, he's a judge. He's not home, but that doesn't make any difference. And she walks right into the house, takes me into the den, and there we watched of this judge. I kept thinking something to get us for breaking and entering, right? So we watched it, and Kate was happy. I think the film came out, did really well. CBS, they asked me if she would be up to doing another one. And I said, I'll talk to her about that. So always in person, never on the phone, always in person. So I went to New York and we hemmed and hawed and who's going to be the writer and, all those things. So my friend, Dwayne Poole, who just passed, he was such a sweet person and such a gentle spirit and such a wonderful writer. I hired Dwayne. And during that prep time, I arranged for, oh boy, do I remember this. I arranged for Dwayne to come to New York and meet Kate. She didn't ask to meet him, but it's just everything was about what is best for Kate. Dwayne and I think it was MGM. You remember that old airline? MGM had an airline.
Oh, wow. That was really brief.
Yeah. And it was fancy. It was like, it made it out to be like a private jet. Mm. And I remember Dwayne and I were so happy to go see Kate. We drank champagne that whole flight. I mean, we must have been. And I remember we were doing silly things. I do think that the stewardess had to calm us down a little bit. These two crazy boys. So it was a wonderful visit with Kate. She was really comfortable with Dwayne. And the name of the film was This Can't Be Love. And Dwayne had written a story about an aging actress who was exactly like Kate, and a gentleman who she had once been married to, they got divorced, who had appeared back in her life and was romancing her. The only problem was the reason he's romancing her is he's trying to get more info out about her so he can write this book about the relationship.
Wow.
Yeah. So initially, I will tell you, working with Kate was a wonder because I would call the network and I would say, now, is this okay? Yes, don't ask us again. Just do what you want to do. That was my whole experience with her, just to have Kate, right? We had to cast this other gentleman. So I'm sitting with my little black book, which I still have. I couldn't find it. Other than the series, as you know, moving. But I went through my book, and for some reason, I do not know why, I stopped at Shelley Winters.
Ah.
I came across, I don't know why I stopped on that page with so I had Shelley's home phone number. And I thought, she is a friend of Anthony Quinn. I knew that. And I thought maybe Shelley would have his phone number. And now it started beginning to go in my mind. Katharine Hepburn and Anthony Quinn. He's got 2 Oscars. She had 4, but he has 2. He's a marvelous actor. I'd never met him. Nothing. Shelley gave me his phone number, and she said, here, take this other number too. I think he's in his studio, because he was a painter and he did sculpturing in New York. Well, lo and behold, I called the studio, and hello, it was him on the phone. And I said, would you like to work with Katharine Hepburn? Oh my God, that's the dream of my life. Really, could I do that? And I got it, just like that.
Thank you for joining me for part 2 of my conversation with John Dayton. I'll be back with more of my conversation with John in another segment. See you then. Thanks for watching.